Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to continue covering games from Liberec Open with my round 5 game. So after round 3 in which I had a devastating loss and round 4 in which I had a quick win thanks to my opponent's opening mistakes, in round 5, which was played in the afternoon of day 4, I faced a 1900 opponent, 1976, with the black pieces. Again, the tournament context is very relevant here. So after round 3 I didn't really get a good night's sleep. I was extremely tired, and even though I finished round 4 in about an hour, I still didn't manage to get enough rest until 4 o'clock in the afternoon when round 5 was played. So usually when I don't get enough sleep, I don't feel like playing chess. I think it's the same for everybody, but I just cannot get rest during the day. So I wasn't fully rested for the game, which for me is a big handicap. My opponent plays the 2 knights against the caro-kann, which is what I saw in his games online. And I didn't have a lot of data to prepare because there weren't many games with bishop g4. In fact, I think there wasn't a single one, maybe one. So I couldn't really tell what he was going to do. And after h3, I play both bishop f3 and bishop h5. And until half an hour before the game, I still hadn't decided what I was going to be playing. In the end, I decided to go for bishop takes f3. I wanted a positional game instead of a tactical, complicated position in which I'm basically the one getting attacked first. If you're unfamiliar with bishop to h5, those lines get extremely tricky because my bishop gets locked in on g4 and eventually on g6, excuse me, and after knight e5 eventually white captures. I have to take with the h-pawn, with the f-pawn, my king ends up on f7 and so on. So h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. Okay, and here I played knight f6, which is not the most common move. e6 is the most common, but knight to f6 plays against d4 basically doesn't allow queen takes d4. Those lines with queen takes d4. In any case, after g3, I still transpose to the main lines with pawn to e6. I should mention that instead of g3, the most concrete way for white to try and punish black for giving up the bishop pair is to play d3, bishop to d2, castles, and then simply continue with g4, g5. So those are the lines I'm most afraid of, even though now I have some experience. Okay, so e6, bishop to g2, and this position I've played many times before. You can find my game from Parachin Open in round 1 against, I don't remember his name, it was a Greek gentleman, 2250, and also round 2 from Silver Lake Open against Mijatovic Dusan, 2200. So I've played these lines often, and I go for a setup which not many people play. In fact, I've never seen anyone play it, but I still don't understand why it would be inferior to the main line. Let me show you what I mean. So knight bd7, d4, as soon as d4 is played and you have a knight on d7, you should really exchange on e4, because e5, even though it's not too bad to deal with this, let's say I do nothing, I can always go back and read out my knight and play c5 and knight c6, play a sort of French defense, but it's giving up too much space and it would take me too much time to do all of that. So exchanging is the principled way to play. So takes, 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 knight to f6 with tempo, queen to d3. And here there were 7 or 8 games from this position in Grandmaster play, and people always play bishop to e7. I don't see a reason to do that. I've tried to figure it out, but still I always end up playing bishop to d6 instead. The reason is simple. I'm not really afraid of the pin with bishop to g5, and d5 is a long way away still. So the reason to play bishop to e7 is to fight against d5 indirectly, basically supporting d5 with the queen, and also to unpin the knight in advance. But should white continue with bishop g5 at any point, you can simply play pawn to h6, and taking is never really a possibility, because if c4 d5, then b2 is hanging. And also, the bishop on d6 is very useful in conjunction with the queen on c7. There is often pressure on g3, and especially when the h-pawn starts moving h5, h4, that could be troublesome for white. There is another pattern, which I never got to use before until this game, which makes bishop d6, the idea with bishop d6 even stronger, and that's to have my queen and my bishop on these two diagonals, doesn't matter which one where, which basically means that after castles kingside, the g3 pawn is hanging. Now bear that in mind. Okay, I should mention that after castles, my opponent played rook e1, rook e8. The idea is basically for white to break through black's defenses with d5. If d5 is not played in this perfect caro-kann structure, then black can never be worse and white can never really make significant progress. Any queenside play can be easily prevented. For example, if a4, black can play a5, and I've had a game with that as well. In fact, I managed to overtake the queenside and be better against the 2250 opponent in Parachin. So d5 is white's positional goal and attacking goal. At the same time, black doesn't really have an active plan unless there's a kingside attack, which is really hard to achieve. Okay, so I played queen to, he played bishop to e3, I played h6 here, not queen to c7 straight away. The reason is that if I go queen to c7 and he goes bishop to g5, I still go h6 and the position is fine, but he can double my pawns. And this is something I've actually tested and analyzed, positions like this after queen to f3. And even though black should be equal, I think they are harder for black to play because it takes me some time to reroute my pieces to the defense. That being said, if I do manage to do that, then I could have a strong attack after something like king to h8 and rook to g8, if I'm not hanging anything. But as I said, I don't want to do that. And he played bishop to e3, so it may seem absurd to play h6 now, but I want to prevent bishop g5 before I move my queen, so now I can move my queen freely. Rook ad1, queen to c7, okay, and c4, and this is all very normal position. I've had it before. Okay, so white wants to play d5. What I want to do, firstly, is I need to control this diagonal. And I'm not saying it's good, but if white manages to play c5, for example, I don't do anything and he plays c5 and I go bishop f8 and he plays bishop to f4. This is of course a huge hole in the white position, but d6 is also a weak square and my bishop is now inferior. In fact, it will take me several moves to untangle here. For example, queen to d7, and of course I'm looking forward to things like bishop takes c5 and knight to d5 and all of that, but I need to be careful. So for the moment I need to keep my bishop on d6 and I need to keep control over the diagonal. So I played rook a to d8. The idea behind rook a d8 is that once I move my queen away, if c5 ever happens, I can play bishop to c7 or bishop to b8. That way, making sure that I still control the diagonal, while at the same time, I've provoked a weakness on d5. So after rook to d8, I'm one move away from making c5 a positional blunder. Okay, queen to b3. And now queen to b8. And queen to b8 is specifically designed against this idea with bishop to f4. Also, my queen is useful here because after moves like a5 or a6, I can transfer my queen to a7 and have the aforementioned bishop to g3. I should say that in this position, the engine prefers b6, which I didn't consider. b6 is a move I never take lightly or play lightly. Of course, it prepares c5, but if white strikes out with c5, then bishop to f8, and then bishop to f4, and my queen goes to b7, I've given up the diagonal for the d5 square, and I'm not sure how happy I am with that. My bishop, again, is just an inferior piece. Of course, I could lash out with g5 and play bishop g7, knight d5, and put pressure on d4, but still, I didn't really consider b6. The engine says b6 is the best way to play, and that queen b8 is a mistake, but it's still close to equal. Okay, bishop to d2. Now, this of course is a rich strategic position, and there is no clear way forward, so there's going to be a lot of maneuvering, and both my opponent and I have to find strategic ideas to improve the position. He wanted to transfer the bishop to c3, which makes d5 stronger, because if he's going to double my f-pawns, that not only means that my structure is ruined, but also that it undefends d5. So basically, once d5 is played and I take for the first time, he gets to trade, removing the defender. And for the moment, I only have 3 pieces defending. So if he manages to trade off the bishop for the knight, there will only be 2. So I played bishop to c7. Bishop c7 reinforces d5, attacks the d4 pawn, and also threatens bishop to b6 after d5 with queen g3 ideas, especially if he plays bishop c3, which he did play, which undefends g3. And now I did play bishop to b6, which is a mistake. After bishop to b6, the engine thinks white is better, and that the advantage is actually significant, +1, or slightly more than +1. Instead of bishop b6, the correct way to play is to start an attack on the king side, which is understandable, with the plan, which I know, which I've mentioned already, moving the h-pawn up the board, especially now when the bishop can no longer come to g5 in one move. So the engine plays h5. And I did consider h5 at several points in the game, and here as well. And how does white continue? Well, he doesn't want to play h4. h4 would be a huge blunder because of knight to g4, and if knight g4, d5, I can actually just take everything, and this is getting very scary. At least I'm going to win a couple of pawns for a piece, but it could be worse. Maybe black could just win this position with slightly inferior play by white. So after h5, white should basically ignore that. There's no way to prevent h4. So let's say a4. And a4 is a good plan, just trying to undermine my structure. If he manages to provoke a6, then I can never use the b6 square again. So let's say h4. And I saw this. I didn't think a4 was the only move for white, but whatever he plays, I was going to play h4. Now the problem is, if g4, then that's fine. I mean, I've created some weaknesses, and this I can understand positionally. I can play knight h7, knight g5, and start to put pressure. But the problem is, what if white just takes? And I couldn't figure out what to do. When I put this on an engine, the engine wants to play knight h5 here, and after knight h5, d5 says white is much better. So, and I agree. I mean, why is my knight on h5? Why did I undefend d5? What did I achieve with ruining this pawn structure and giving up a pawn? It's not that clear to me that black has anything, and in fact the engine agrees. So if h5 is the correct way to play and h4 is the correct follow-up, but white is better after gh4, then I don't see a point. So it's still not clear to me how I should be improving my position. As I said, I played bishop to b6, which was a mistake. Probably doubling up my rooks on the d-file was a better idea, and probably that was the safest thing to do. Now, the problem with bishop to b6, even though it prevents d5, is that a4 can be played. And after a4, I either have to go back to c7, which is an obvious loss of tempo, or if I play a6, I blunder my bishop, or I have to play queen to c7. And after c5, I have to trade with bishop a5, queen a5, queen b7, rook d4. Where after something like bishop to c6, white has to be better, has 2 passed pawns on the queen side and a tempo on my rook. So yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. So after bishop to b6, a4, which is a pretty obvious move, it just punishes bishop to b6. My opponent played queen to c2 though, and in this position I decided to double my rooks and played rook to d7. And after not much thought, my opponent did play d5, which is a blunder. And I knew it was a blunder. I just thought it was impossible. I didn't even consider it as a serious candidate because it just loses material. Let me show you why. So d5. And If I play queen g3, I lose the game because of c5. Let me show you. So queen takes g3, bishop f6, defending the c5 pawn, gf6, and now c5. Queen attacked, bishop attacked, so that doesn't work. However, after d5, I can simply trade off his c pawn and then take. So if he recaptures now, then I go queen g3. So obviously he has to take the knight first. And after d5, since I thought it was impossible, when he played it, of course you need to ask yourself, did I miss anything? What's the point? What did I miss in my analysis that I thought that d5 was impossible? So I analyzed for about 20 minutes, and I tried to go very deep into the lines, and I'm happy to say that I analyzed everything correctly before d5 and after it was played as well. So cd, again, cd is just nothing. I can just take with the knight, and that's it, and then take on g3. So he has to play bishop f6. I take, and now cd5, and I take on g3. Okay, and the point is that queen g3 wins a clean pawn. So his only move is d6, but he cannot really take d6 because he gets a losing position. And it's very hard to see all the subtleties in the position, but when I took 20 minutes, I figured everything out. So d6. Now, of course, this rook is hanging, my pawn is attacked, everything seems to be kind of complicated, but I have rook takes e6. And now, either way he wins my rook, he loses the game. If he plays rook takes d7, then rook e1 is mate. That much is simple. So this is just checkmate. So after rook e6, the move that has to be calculated is queen to c8 check. And after king to g7, if he takes this guy, so queen takes d7, I don't take. I'm sorry. I take on f2 with the bishop. And then after king h1, I don't take rook e1 because that's an opposite color bishop endgame. So let me show you that. So rook e1, bishop e1, queen g4. And after takes, and something, that this should be a draw. I mean, I am 2 pawns up, but it's impossible to win this. It's just, that's a draw. Even if I thought it could be won, I never would have entered this position. But after king h1, I just take with the bishop, and this is completely winning. Black is just threatening rook e2, and game over. Okay, so after rook takes e6, he cannot win this rook directly or indirectly, and I'm just a pawn up. So my opponent played king to f1. I took on e1. He took on e1, and I played queen to f4. Again, he cannot win this rook because if queen c8, king g7, queen d7, queen f2 mate. Okay. Okay, before we continue, I want to go back to the critical position after rook to d7. So I was going to be doubling my rooks. I thought d5 was impossible, and it was. What my opponent should have done is simply doubled himself, and that's sort of as far as I can go to improve my position, or I couldn't see anything else to do. So if he plays rook e2, I go rook e d8, he goes rook e d2, and now what do I do? I don't know. I was going to play a5, and after b3, for example, or something, doesn't matter. I was going to play queen to a7. I'm not sure what to do here, how to improve further. Let's say queen to b2. Okay, maybe knight e8, knight e7. I don't know. This is a very complicated position in which I don't know how to make progress. To be frank, I don't know how to make progress with either color, so it's questionable whether my opponent would have found a way to improve. But this is as far as I could go. The engine says a4. But that's sort of move that does something on the queen side, but doesn't do anything for what the main problem in the position is. Other than that, queen b8, knight e8, all sort of waiting moves. Okay, in any case, let's go back to the game. So king f1, rook e1, queen f4. My opponent played rook to e2, and now black is winning. This position is just overwhelming. I am a pawn up, but that doesn't matter. I get to play rook to c7 and attack the queen, my opponent played rook to e4. It's really hard to suggest a better move. The engine says rook e4 best. Every other move is -8. And when he played rook e4, I had about 15 minutes on the clock, maybe 20, I'm not sure. And there are two options here. One option is to trade queens, the other is not to trade queens. Now, I like simple endgames in which I'm winning without any tactical issues, because I always have this nagging fear that I'm going to miss something. So if I can trade queens here, and I think I have a winning position, then I'm going for that. The other option is not to trade queens. And I saw both, of course, and I chose the wrong one. Okay, so how do you not trade queens? Well, you play queen to d6. Obviously, this keeps attacking white's queen. Now, if it's very hard to suggest a move for white. The engine says rook e8 is the best move, queen b3 is -4, queen takes c7 is the third best move. So let's say rook to e8. Let's just follow this line. King to g7, and now it plays queen to f5. Okay. And now you simply improve your pieces until you can get to attack the f2 square once more. So the engine plays rook to c5. I'm not saying this is simple, but it's not very hard to keep improving your position either. Okay, so that's the engine line. What I thought was a normal human line was rook g4, check, and king to f8. And this is what I was looking at during the game. And now, for example, queen to b3, just saving your queen. And now I was going to play rook to c1 here and f5, dislodging the rook. And once the rook goes to c4, which is what I thought most humans would play, I was going to play queen e5 and then, let's say, king to d3. And I didn't see a clear win, something like queen d6, maybe king e2. What now? This is sort of where I got in my calculation, and I couldn't see a clear way forward. And then, coming back to the original position, I thought, okay, well, maybe I can trade queens, and let's just try to calculate out that position. So rook takes c2, rook takes f4, rook takes b2, rook f6, king g7, rook f5. And then I thought, okay, I take on a2. I take on a2, and that's winning. Okay, simple enough. So I went for that. So rook takes c2, takes, rook takes b2, takes, and here. Okay. And after rook f5, my original intention when I went for rook c2 was just to take on a2. The problem is that I didn't see rook f7 when I was debating on whether I should trade queens or not. And after king f7, bishop to d5. And this position is a draw. I have two connected passed pawns, but I don't think that's enough to win. The engine says -0.6, 0.6, so that according to the engine it's a draw. Black should be better, and black is the one with the winning chances, but it should be a draw. So when we reached this position, I decided to play f6. By the way, 3 days after the game, when I met my opponent in the hallway, he said, "Why were you disappointed after the game?" I said, "Well, because I had queen d6, which was just a winning queen endgame. I didn't have to go for the endgame." He said, "Yeah, okay, I remember that." And then I told him about rook f7, and he said, no, if you'd taken on a2, I would have taken on b7, which now I like my position. That being said, still, there's rook f7, so I probably throw in rook a1, king to g2, and a5, and start pushing my pawn. And this now actually seems like a winning position. But after rook f5, I played f6, and he took on b7, I took on a2, fairly similar, king to g2, and I played rook to b2. Rook to b2 is unnecessary, it's just imprecise. I should have played a5 straight away. I definitely should have played a5. It's not as if his rook can move away. I mean, I'm putting pressure on f2. So rook b2 is just a stupid move. Not that I want to threaten bishop f2, it's just, I don't know why I did that. I have no idea. He played bishop a6. Blockading. So rook a2, the bishop moves away. It's not the same thing now because I cannot play a5. My rook is attacked, so rook to d2. And this, I should say that the position is just drawn. The engine thinks it's a draw, but playing rook to d2 sort of plays against the only advantage I have in the position, which is the a7 pawn. So again, this is another mistake. Even though it doesn't change the evaluation of the position, rook d2 makes no sense. What I wanted to do was make progress with my king and with my pawns. So king g6, rook f3, and f5. And here I just, after playing f5, I just missed that he has bishop to d3, which is stupid. I thought I could take on f2, but I cannot take on f2 because he takes on f5 with check first. So here, with a lot of frustration, I just took on f2 and we agreed to a draw. It's the bishop of the wrong color, whatever the name of that is the wrong colored bishop, because he has the h pawn, which is a light squared pawn, and I'm sorry, he has a light squared bishop and the h pawn, which queens on a dark square. He can never win even if I only have my king, so this is a draw. So the game ended rook f2, bishop f2, king f2. I'm just gonna give up all three of my pawns and do this, let's say, yeah, and this is a draw. Whatever he does, whatever I do, it's a draw. I just stay on these three squares. So I didn't manage to win a one position. Needless to say, I was extremely frustrated, but I was also very happy to go to sleep. So I finally did get some rest after round 5. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to call this mistake laziness. Not seeing rook takes f7 is just a... It's not that I wouldn't see it had I been looking for it, I just didn't invest enough time. Obviously, with 15 minutes on the clock, I have enough time to assess the endgame. I just didn't spend enough of it. So I ended up drawing a game I should have won after queen to d6. Again, the fact that the engine says -4 or -8 doesn't mean anything if you don't have a correct winning plan in that queen endgame, but I would have had winning chances. Once I exchanged queens, it was just a draw. Okay, see you tomorrow for round 6. Round 6 was very interesting. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.